Did you know that this line between day and night is called Terminator? And polar sun-synchronous orbit can literally ride the Terminator. In this Kerbal Space program video, I would be building a space station that can ride the Terminator. There are a lot of interesting things about this orbit. For example, space station in this orbit will always stay in the sunlight. This is why space station can remove several key components from everyday operations. Sun tracking for solar panels? You don't need it. Batteries to store power while stationed in the planetary shade? Well, not going to happen. Rotation servers for radiators? Well, just put them into a permanent shade behind other modules. And if you construct station in a specific manner, you can shield your habitable modules from constant temperature swings. Only real thing that you need is station attitude control. But every single real space station have some sort of attitude control already. For example, ISS perfected its ZPM back in 2007. And I'm not talking about 0-point module from Stargate Atlantis. ZPM is Zero Propellant Maneuver. ISS is using its control moment gyroscopes to maintain its attitude over long periods of time. And making ZPM powered by these gyros was a real deal to save quite a bit of propellant for a station altitude boosts. ISS or not, we still need to put our KSP station into a polar orbit. So without further ado, let's launch some Kerbal stuff. Launching things into a polar orbit from equator is not the best idea in the build. Kerbin rotates at something about like 200 or 250 meters per second at equator, so closer you are to equator, more of delta V you need to overcome this rotation. And closer you are to the poles, lesser is your rotation speed relative to a polar orbit. Unfortunately, the game do not really provide us with high latitude runways, so I am using modded Space Center to launch my SSTO into a polar orbit. KSP Extended is perfect modification for this exact task. Also, I'm using majority of mods from this video, with several extras like Near Future Solar and Nebula Skybox. Since I'm feeling a bit fancy, this SSTO is running biggest lithium engine from Near Future Propulsion as the main orbital drive. And it's actually quite a balanced engine since, well, you need to meet a lot of power demands when you are running this engine. That means actually you need to run nuclear reactors, which well require to manage the heat. So yeah, it's quite a fun challenge in itself. This video about the station, not the SSTO itself. So this is nuclear electric SSTO hybrid that will build the station. And my first launch was probably one of the worst launches. I did not hit proper polar orbit and was too early with my Terminator launch window. So this actually ended up costing me something about like 1k delta V in orbital corrections. So yeah, quite a challenge. So once I get to orbit, I change the craft inclination to 90 degrees. And then I need to change the longitude of ascended node to 90 degrees as well. And there is no like magic button in MechJab to get precise maneuvers, so I'm using several maneuvers over like several orbits. So this is not really precise, but in the end you can get there. When I first thought about this orbit idea, I was thinking that it requires some specific altitude to function, just like geostationary orbits. But it is not the case for any polar orbit. Only real thing that you need to care is your perfect launch window and precession angle to counter planetary rotation during launch. The first launch had a core module with one of the orbital tugs. This would be one of 3 tugs that help to assemble station and would function as secondary attitude control via RCS. We do not really need to boost stations in KSP, but in reality something like that would help to boost decay in station orbit once in a while. Landing from Terminator orbit is just the same as from any other orbit, and you will need to wait until Terminator alignment of your runway. And obviously it would be in the twilight, and if you want to land during daylight, you will need to change your orbit into a specific direction, and that actually comes at a price. As a typical technique here, I'm using the cargo bay doors as huge air brake. I totally forgot to pack some air brakes, and well, coming from the polar orbit, I think it's a bit faster than usual. And, well, I'm landing at Tundra Space Center. Tundra Space Center is actually quite a difficult place to land. Runway have hills on the both sides and actually rather short and narrow. Was a bit too hard on my brakes and ended up stopping outside of runway after a short spaceplane drift. Second launch, second mission, second payload. And it actually was a bit more successful, slowly getting the grasp of the whole Tundra runway orientation and Kerbin rotation. After the Reaper boost was only 2 degrees off from the 90 degree inclination and was still about like 5 degrees from the Kerbin Terminator, so orbital corrections were in order. And the interesting thing about Colossus engine that I'm using that, well, it's not only looks great, it's lithium, and it eats like 3k electric charge per second. Obviously it's easily overheats, especially if you fire it like for 5 minutes in atmosphere. Alright, Rendezvous Station works in pretty similar fashion as any other orbit. Just get to slightly higher or lower orbit and wait for the Hoffman maneuver to a station. And the second delivery was the main thrust section. Nothing fancy here, I will still need to get 4 of similar thrust sections to an orbit. It have gyros on both ends, and together with orbital tag it form a nice triangle to control orbit station attitude. Control the control. Landing number 2 was done at Tundra Space Center from the other side of the runway, and still need to actually get better. My main issue here that I'm using brakes just too early. First you need to touch down, stabilize your craft like in horizontal axis, and only then engage your brakes, and engage them in like reasonable fashion, not like 200 degrees fashion. With the third launch it becomes a bit more interesting. I have totally nailed my orbital angle and injected the SSTO into the near perfect Terminator orbit. But while I was really on point with my angles in one axis, I have failed with angle of ascent on the other axis. When it was time to fire up rapiers, I was a bit too slow, and that resulted in a very shallow orbit in the end. Colossus engine started to overheat, and I was forced to spend the whole orbit in the upper atmosphere before actually successfully escaping into the vacuum of space. It was a quite close SSTO launch in a while. The actual payoff was absolutely awesome because when I achieved my orbit, there was no extra correction required. Like, I literally just transferred to a station at a proper time with like whopping 10 meters per second of a maneuver. Like, this is actual space precision. At first I actually thought to build the whole thrust section gradually as I had like pressurized modules. And the whole process should involve the orbital tags that will wield everything around, but like precise docking at near perfect angles with offset RCS from the orbital tags, yeah, it's a bit questionable. And vanilla docking port rotation feature it's kinda a bit lackluster when you need to fix like small deviations, and I want this like near perfect and flush look on my solar panels. So it was decided to draw the whole thrust section with an SSTO itself, because yeah, I can. And also it's like way more precise, it's perfectly balanced and have just enough of clearing to dock with a station consisting of, well, thrust section and single core module, because nothing else is actually sticking out. First I was a bit off with the whole docking procedures, and let's face it, vanilla SAS is just not up to the task when it comes to angle deviation lower than 0.1 degree. So I have used Smart ASS from mech, and was able to kill off that pesky rotation and hit exact angle with the docking ports. During the third landing I was feeling a bit more naughty, so I decided to land on a service road instead of a runway. And yeah, that was a bit scuffed to say the least. It's just too narrow, especially like when you decide to land in the dark. But if you manage to put your landing gear just between like the trenches, it can actually kinda work. Almost destroyed my landing gear like 3 or 4 times during this little landing stunt, but I actually remember that I was landing here my space shuttles before I understood that, well, there is an actual runway just nearby. Yeah, that was kind of interesting experience. Yeah. Next 3 launches was about getting every single thrust section to the station, and just like the first time, I was using my SSTO as a huge orbital tag to get the precise docking. And the results are quite impressive to say the least. It is like probably the most precise docking that I have ever done in KSP. Usually I do not really bother even if I like several degrees off, and there is always this like vanilla docking port rotation feature, and with normal stations you can kinda just redock things rather easily. But for this station, I want just to hit this like perfect flush angles to have like very like flush solar panel look. And if you are even like half a degree off, it's still quite noticeable when facing the sun. Alright, but what is the actual point of the thrust section on a space station? As you know, stations like Salute, Skylab, Mir or Tiangong, they do not really have any thrust, and only ISS features some sort of a thrust section. Well, all those like more simpler or previous generation stations, they manage their heat and power on board. And this can result in some issues, like for example leaking toxic coolant inside of your habitation module. Well, not fun. ISS was pretty much next logical step to separate habitable modules from technical systems. And, well, ISS was also the weird hybrid of Mir 2 and Space Station Freedom, and they both desire to do better than predecessor space stations, both Mir and Skylab. And speaking about our termination station, Trask here not only can host all those like nasty life support and power generation things, but it can provide permanent sunshade for the rest of the station. And since it's rather big rectangular, it can also serve as a basis for several connection points for multiple modules. And it just looks cool. And in the end, I had all 5 Trask sections nicely docked together. With mission number 7, I have started delivery of science and habitation modules. There are 2 modules in the cargo bay. And maybe it doesn't make sense to deliver small modules with, well, such a huge cargo bay. Well, just compose the whole station from the big modules. But on the other hand, this is the beauty of modular construction. You can just split things not only in like logical units, but you can also shift the center of mass. And since we want to have balanced center of mass at all times, actually delivering 2 modules for 2 opposing nodes kinda makes sense. First I undocked one of the modules with the docking port from the cargo bay, and my packing skills definitely failed here, since the module was yeeted out into the space, so it took quite some time to catch the bloody thing and finally to deliver it to a proper docking port. As you can notice, I'm using weird 1.75 mirror docking ports to connect station modules, and these are docking ports from docking ports extended modification. After first docking, I need to dock Science Lab to opposing side, and here I'm using orbital tag to move the whole module around. Science module have that extra docking attachment underneath. And after failing just a bit with the whole docking approach, with couple small pads I have nested the module into the proper place. Yeah, definitely Kerbal Space Program gameplay. Just smashing multi-billion things when they do not fit. Yeah. After the module assembly, there was a spacewalk in order. Beauty of Trask section is ability to connect things, and this is exactly what was done with some of the struts on the both modules. And well, after the strut connection, I just assembled a whole bunch of science experiments on my science module. Haptech provide quite extensive replica of this ISS part, and the whole thing is like 60 parts, so I just simplified it quite a bit. Well, to have more room for more parts elsewhere, because I'm not reasonable, I will not do simple things, I just increase amount of things in other places. Alright. And at this point I have noticed that my Terminator orbit is not really the Terminator orbit. I thought the issue is in non-perfect inclination and like 1 minute of deviation from Terminator, but after actually closely reviewing the footage I have noticed some weird behavior. Orbit just changed on its own. Yeah, X-Files music or something. Definitely some sort of a bug. Maybe something with the floating point error, maybe something with modded parts. Well, I will never know, it's just there, so I have decided to shift the whole orbit even more to make the whole lap around the planet. Actually, not the best idea. Was actually a bit wrong about maneuvers, since I need to change eccentricity of an orbit, not anything else, but whatever, in the end I got to the desired orbit, and it was like 200 days. So, 200 days after, I was pretty much in the place to make the proper corrections, with several small burns. So let's hope that after this correction, station will not teleport around. So, this time around, return was done to land at KSP during the daytime. And notice the burn delta V for such a small feat. Yeah, if there would be a real station in this orbit, anything outside of like dawn and dusk launches are out of the window. And this is kinda interesting since, well, the whole Earth axial tilt actually shifts the time of launch. so it would slowly shift during the year with, well, shift of sunsets and sunrises. But well, Kerbin is kinda cheat-enabled planets with like 0 inclination, 0 eccentricity and 0 axial tilt. Yeah, not going to happen in reality. On other thought, the universe is actually infinite, so somewhere the planet like Kerbin actually exists, like 0 inclination, 0 degrees, axial tilt, whatever. Oh, if you think about it, wait a second, universe is infinite, so somewhere there is the Earth clone, where there is the KSP 2 that actually function at release. So the actual runway touchdown was about to be perfect, but then SSTO decided just to bounce from a runway, and at one point decision was actually made to go for the second try, but the brakes actually worked like a charm, and even with the like engine blasting at maximum throttle, SSTO managed to stop just right at the end of the runway. Yeah, KSP gameplay at its finest. So, the delivery number 8, and it involved 2 more modules. There are the first docking multi-node and even more Science Lab real estate. And these are kinda sort of 3 modules, not 2 modules, but the ability to actually undock the docking multi-node is only there if I ever want to expand the truss section. And this is only needed to add like extra headroom for the docking purposes. And once again, I had opportunity to dock everything via orbiter itself, but I think I just cannot simplify and do normal launch ever. And I always like something just going sideways. This is why I over-engineer things. So this time around I was experimenting with amount of nuclear fuel put into reactors, and I was a bit too precise. And I kinda managed to get into actual orbits, but I had no uranium to run my reactors to provide electricity once in orbit. And my RCS system is actually using lithium, and it is heavily reliant on electric charge. So with only one tiny bitty backup RTG, I was not generating enough electric charge to run the whole set of RCS thrusters. Something about 20 minutes in, I have realized that there is something wrong with controls, and I swapped to the plan B. Orbital TAC is more than capable to do the docking procedures. RCS system on TAC actually even more powerful than that of an SSTO, and only challenge here is overall lack of balance that result in huge fuel consumption to compensate for like overall wobble. And actually I had an idea. So what if I can just put the set of RCS thrusters on the telescoping cylinders? So you dock with the module, extend extra set of thrusters to offset, well, RCS according to center of mass. Yeah, this is kind of interesting. Another day, another landing, another service road attempt. And I'm surprised, like I'm throwing this SSTO around like crazy. And in reality, this SSTO, like I'm surprised that it just didn't proc, because sometimes when you just fully fuel, fully load it and just launch it, it will just break apart on the runway. Right now it's surviving this. What is this? Mission number 9. It was the delivery of second docking multi-node with extra cavitation module. This time around docking was done with SSTO itself, just like it was supposed to be with the mission number 8. And there is some sort of surreal thing about construction space station with a space plane. When you dock your cargo space plane to a station, it just looks huge and ridiculous. And this was the case with the Mir, ISS and Space Shuttle. On the one hand, it is obvious when the station is built from the modules fitting into the cargo bay of, well, docked spaceplane. But when we think about science fiction like imagery, usually it is the other way around. Huge space stations and like small tiny spaceplanes and spaceships. Well, reality is always way more awesome and interesting. And after the whole docking procedures, another spacewalk was in order. And this time around I was putting struts to the rest of the top modules. And as I progressed with the space construction, game just started to throw at me some lighting bugs. Pretty common issue for KSP 1. I think this is when you highlight the modules in like construction mode. I don't know, whatever. Let's hope one day in KSP 2 we will do the same things with vanilla gameplay and no bugs. Someday, maybe. I hope. But until that time comes, we have KSP 1 to pull off some stunts. I have made my deorbit into Tundra range to have some daylight, and once again I went for my favorite thing already, landing at access road. And this time around it was better, still not perfect. And while I was like gloriously looking at how I have threaded the needle in the trenches, well, I just forgot to press brakes and run out of road. Yeah. Alright, sort of an anniversary mission, mission number 10. This payload features some of habitation level modules and one extra tag. Docked orbiter properly via matching docking ports, and actually like reaction control system of the space station is so powerful that it can actually overcome the torque from the docking ports, which is kinda huge. So I need to swap back and forth between station and docking craft to make things happen. Payload is released and tag is starting to do its thing. And following gameplay just showcase why nobody in real life actually do something like this. Well, like wielding multi-ton modules with offset center of trust. Things would smash. And real space things, they are rather fragile, lightweight, and definitely not have like Millennium Falcon level of rigidity. This is why every single space station have some sort of like robotic arm. And even like Mir Space Station and Tiangong still have one. Docking was done like to one single node, and then afterwards robotic arm just reposition modules to the side nodes. Less things to do, less things to break. And as usual, when things looks too smooth, they just tend to break. Second docking for this mission was rather questionable, and this was sort of the same issue as with the orbiter itself. SAS of the station was just overpowering docking port torque and just moving station around, and I was trying to compensate manually with my RCS, and well, offset RCS just doesn't make things easier. After that, habitation modules were inflated. For inflatable modules, I'm using Stocklight station parts, really nice mod, and inflatable modules have free IVA as a cherry on top. Finally, tags were repositioned to a proper position, and now station only missed the third tag to be docked at nadir position of the station. And if you think about it, triangular shape kinda makes sense for this station, and well, the propulsion system itself. Landing number 10 was once again done on Tundra runway, nothing fancy, just good old subpar landing. Mission number 11. It is actually finally getting there. This one carries lower science labs with huge communication array and huge telescope. And obviously you can point them either way. This reminds me of a binocular that I have near my window. New people always have some like snarky joke about me like watching the neighbors or something. Yeah, man, you are so original. Okay, I just watched the traffic jam on the bridge leading out of town. By this point I just want to buy some ridiculous maritime binocular and troll people even more, something about like, yeah, I'm watching neighbors in 4K, come on. Alright, so I have docked everything via the cargo bay, just like with the thrust sections. And after looking at this footage, I'm thinking that I should design the station like this, like from the ground up, because this makes more sense. It's easier, simpler, less things to break. You do not really like need orbital tags when you construct station like this. It's kind of interesting. Yeah. Definitely need to try to make the station like this in the future. And the final 12th mission actually delivered several small modules to finish up the station makeup. The whole thing reminds me of some sort of kebab and now I want to eat. But otherwise I just nested the airlock, communication node and science lab to a final and third tag. And probably like docking SSTO vertically is not the best idea when you want to have some headroom to do the docking, but well, KSP is always about doing some weird things that actually doesn't make any real sense. Communication module decided to be a difficult one, but nothing that can be solved with omnipotent docking acquire force. And after placing communication array, it was time to dock the last module to a nadir... Wait a second, this is not really a nadir node. Station actually facing the sun with opposite sides, and this node is not facing the Earth center, so it should not be called nadir node. Yeah, this orbit and this station is so bizarre, like, yeah, I'm just running out of my space knowledge, if there was any to begin with. Here you go, the Terminator station, or station that rides Terminator. 21 module station with 13 of them being pressurized modules. This video is already a rather long one and, well, stay tuned for a station tour in the next video. Leave your thoughts down below, maybe there is something else that we can do with the orbit like this. Thank you for watching and have a nice one. Yakis out!